And we are live. Welcome to another episode of EriK Wait Live. Doing these live streams sort of sporadically, and my phone just supposed to be on Do Not Disturb. Anyway, it just went chirp. I'm like, shut up, phone. Sorry, interruptions. So, doing these sporadically because I'm spending more time on studying and rather than doing live streams. But I've been doing these head-to-head comparison videos in preparation for the Master of Scotch exam, which I'll be taking in April 2024 at the Isle of Raasay. Grumpy old fart, how you doing, man? And from some of the comments I've received to the videos, most of them positive, I can kind of tell most people watch head-to-head videos with for the most part, a singular perspective or goal. Donner Pass, how you doing? Thank you much for tuning in and drinking Campbelltown Lock. Seems like there's a lot of variation in the Campbelltown Lock. The one I have is lighter in color than the one I saw in Scotland. So I think those are very much vintage based. Obviously, it's a blend of single malts from the three brands of Springbank Distillery plus Glengyle plus Glen Scotia. That makes it a blended malt with Glen Scotia. Well, actually, Glengyle too, even though it has the same ownership, it is technically another distillery, even though it's the same producers. And I think the one I have might have more bourbon cask influence than the other ones I've seen. The other ones I've seen have been darker. Anyway. Good evening, all wonderful whiskey people. Not drinking tonight, finishing out up workout and dinner. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. I don't know if I've seen you in before. I think it's pronounced Michael S. Whiskey Derek. I think the RG, if I recall correctly, would be spelled actually pronounced like a K. I could be wrong. I'm going to be able to fart. Thanks for tuning in. Jesus Jimenez. Thank you very much for Winnipeg, Canada. Cool. Four Roses small batch, followed by a Weigel single malt rye. I wonder if that's a typo. Compass Box Peat Monster sounds good. And Justin Wan, good evening, morning on my side. Happy to see y'all. Thanks for tuning in. All righty. So a lot of the comments have been like, oh, that's not a fair comparison. Oh, this one costs so much more, yada, yada, yada. And I'm trying to do these head-to-head comparisons for my particular purpose, which is preparing for an exam. And so what's going on in my mind, I've been trying to say it in the videos, is why I'm doing these comparisons. And so I thought, you know what? Maybe I should do a live stream covering at least 10, there's probably 100 different reasons for doing a head-to-head comparison. So that if you aren't doing head-to-head comparisons, whether it's just two whiskeys or a whole lineup of whiskeys, that you could sort of be inspired to say, hey, yeah, it sounds like a good idea. I want to try that. So tonight, and I'll explain this in a second, I'm doing the Stuidar, Bunnahabhain Stuidar. Stuidar means helmsman. It's an homage to the logo there. You see with my pinky, the helmsman. Versus the Bunnahabhain 12 years old. I'm going to bring up the notes here on this. And as we go through this, I'll tell you the reason why. Correct. Jarek or Jarek means red in Scotch Gaels. Oh, cool. I'm your neighbor in the North Bay. Oh, cool. So I'm in Half Bay. Kind of wonder where you're at now. All right. So the Bunnahabhain 12-year-old, aged in ex-bourbon and ex-sherry cask, non-chill filter, natural color, 46.3% alcohol by volume, about $67 in my neighborhood. The Bunnahabhain Stuidar, it's first and second fill ex-sherry cask, non-chill filter, natural color, also 46.3% alcohol by volume. But look at the price difference. There's a $20 price difference between these two. I'm gonna cough. Hold on. I muted it so you don't hear me cough. I'm a habitual cougher due to allergies. So let me pour myself a little bit, and I'll explain why I'm doing these two particular whiskeys. It's whoa. So the Studar, if you're not familiar with the history of it, the Studar was originally bottled because they were low on supply on the 12-year-old. So they came up with the Studar to sort of fill the marketplace. And then when they got up to production levels, they brought back the 12-year-old. This is, I think, my third bottle of the 12-year-old. And if you haven't had the Bunnahabhain 12, when people ask me about recommendations for Islay whiskey, I recommend from the north, from Bunnahabhain, the Bunnahabhain 12-year-old. I think it's one of the highest quality price ratio whiskeys. So it's bourbon cask, mostly bourbon cask, or at least in the profile. At least 46% alcohol by volume, 12-year-old, non-chilled, natural color, and unpeated. The other one I recommend is everybody probably gonna know if you've been watching for a while, it's gonna be the Ardbeg 10, which is bourbon cask. So sherry versus bourbon, north versus south on Islay, peated versus non-peated. So it's really two very much contrasting bottles, both from Islay and generally two of my favorite distilleries. Bunnahabhain is the most beautiful in terms of the views and the vistas, and in terms of bottles that you can bring home that are not out in the market. Not only if you're there in May, June, or July, you can pick up the official editions, but there were probably, I don't know, 10 different bottles they had there available that aren't wide distribution, that you're just like, man, give me one of those, give me one of those. Of course, you get limited space in your luggage. How that goes. Good evening from southern Alberta, Canada. Thank you very much. I have done the same comparison and could easily tell the difference. Yeah, I agree. I'm not looking for necessarily a huge challenge. So what are my 10 reasons for doing head-to-head comparisons? I'm trying to inspire people for the learning experience. And if you have, by the way, if you're watching this on the replay and you have additional ideas or reasons why you should do head-to-head, put them in the comment section down below. And if you haven't already, give a thumbs up and all the rest of that. All right, so I'm gonna start from number 10, the 10th reason, and work our way up to or down to number 1. The first is cask comparison. In this picture here, I have an American barrel, a bourbon cask Quercus Alba versus a sherry butt, Quercus Robur. Of course, this isn't just bourbon versus sherry in terms of a whiskey. You could have, because there's a lot of whiskeys that are sherry cask or heavily sherry cask influence that aren't 100% sherry, such as this 12-year-old. This spent time in a bourbon cask and finished in a sherry cask. However, if you're smelling and tasting it and looking at it, it's the sherry that's the dominant character. And it's got some nice dark color, sort of a copper orange. I don't know how well that picks up on the camera. On the nose, spice, barbecue spice. I'm getting a little bit of just a hint, a sulfury note that I hadn't picked up on a lot of other bottles. Although I may have picked it up on the very first time I had Bunnahabhain 12-year-old. I mean, when I first had a Bunnahabhain 12, I've been doing this since 2016. I thought I had maybe 3 ppm peat, because if a silver note gets really interwoven with a whiskey really, really well, and it's not offensive, and it's not an obvious matchstick, it gives it a slight smoky character. The Glengarry 12-year-old, I think, is a great example of that. And so if you read reviews of the Glengarry, people will comment that it's got a slight smokiness in there. But in this case, it's a lot more of that funk, that sulfury funk, just a hint. It's not offensive. I don't mind. I'm not super sensitive to it. But you have the figs, you have the dates, you have the raisins. There's a honey character, vanilla, a lot of spice. Now, and I will get more into this. There's another whiskey that it would be good to go head to head with this one. But okay, now the Stewardar. So supposedly this would have more sherry cask influence in terms of, because it's not bourbon and sherry, it's first fill, second fill sherry. And yet the impact of the sherry notes isn't as strong as the 12-year-old. If you can, hey, why do you think, particularly Grumpy Old Fart, why do you think, even though on paper this has more sherry cask influence, why do you think? Why do you think? I'm looking at the game. Why do you think the Stewardar has less sherry influence? Why? Even though it's first and second fill, put it in the comment section. And this is part of the learning process. That's really, 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 really important. Maybe you're watching on your smartphones, you don't feel like typing. Maybe you're watching on a big screen TV. I watch actually mostly you. Yes, exactly. I watch mostly. Exactly. Yep. 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 Hey, Mark, how you doing? Exactly. It hasn't had the time to extract as much out of the cask. It doesn't quite have like the youth, like that powdered sugar, aspartame, saccharin character of something that's really, really young. But you can tell, I liken it to the way a spirit can come across in terms of how much cask intensity it has. It's as imagine somebody grabbing your shirt and just pulling on it, right? I don't want to stretch my shirt out, just pulling on it because climate has a huge impact on it. In fact, another great comparison, take a cask strength, take a Bunnahabhain 12 cask strength, and take the Glenfarclas 105, and take something from Balcones. Take a sherry cask from Balcones and compare them because the Balcones, I don't know how else to, you can tell it just has this climate impact that just is that those notes are pulled out of it, and so there's still a slight sort of, and again they mitigate the climate really, really, really well. Balcones is awesome, but you can tell there's just been this yank out of the cask of the sherry influence. I'm planning a trip in May. I might need to myself. Oh, to Scotland, cool. It's a busy time of year there, particularly if you're around the island. I call young versus old, and yeah, climate has a huge impact. But climate, even though it'll add a lot faster, it won't mitigate the youth notes. So those in Texas, they kind of have to do a dance in how they manage casks. Cask management is really, really huge in Texas in order to mitigate those characters. All right, so that's number 10. Let's go on to number 9. So bourbon cask versus sherry cask. If someone's new, this would be particularly important to not only do bourbon and sherry cask, but a 100% sherry cask versus that's bourbon and sherry cask. So imagine if you had two 18-year-olds. Let's take the Glendronach Allardyce 18-year-old, which is 100% sherry cask, and then take another 18-year-old sherry cask, particularly from Highland, that's comparable in the ABV, 18 years old, but it's bourbon and sherry cask. That would help to some extent sort of get the concept of how bourbon and sherry cask versus 100% sherry cask. Because 100% sherry cask is just going to be a real sherry bomb, which when you're in the mood, I like that. All right, next. I could take any one of these topics and just talk for an hour on it. ABV comparison, number 9, ABV comparison. Now, if you notice, I have here 2 Highland Parks. We have the Highland Park cask strength, which is at 64.4, or the most current release, versus the 12-year-old, which is at 43%. Now, obviously, that's a bigger extreme in cask comparisons. In terms of understanding the difference, it might be better to do a 40 versus a 43, or a 43 versus a 46. Something that's a little closer so that it's not such an obvious extreme difference between the two in terms of wanting to get to understand and know the differences that the ABV makes. But this is an extreme example. This is particularly important if you're going to be doing blind tasting and you're going to get tested on it, because if you understand the core range of a producer and you understand what their bottlings are at, then if you're getting a real heavy, slightly peated sherry cask that's peated, but it's at 40, it seems like it's 46 ABV or higher, then you're like, okay, that can't be Bowmore, because all the Bowmore core range is 40 or 43. And then you have to go back and okay, well, maybe this peat is more intense than I was giving it for. So if it's heavily peated and sherry cask, then you know, okay, Loch Gorm, it's a matter of deduction. Loch Gorm from Kilholman, like 50% ABV, but it's a heavier peat. And you have to kind of judge, okay, how has the sherry been interacting with it? Think, well, you get the Bunnahabhain Ugadal, which is 47.2, if I recall correctly. No, 54.2. Hold on, I'm shooting myself here in the foot. 54.2. Where it is? All right, hold on. No, yeah, 54.2. I just killed a bottle. 54.2. 54.2. I corrected myself, so I still get the points. So it's a matter of deduction. If you can detect the ABV, of course, that's just one part of the overall profile. And if you're doing a blind, you go, well, this is way too high ABV to be Bowmore. So what can it be? What do you have left? And it's about, well, it can't be this, can't be this, can't be this, can't be this. So, and you never want to make a judgment call on a wine or a whiskey based on one typical characteristic. And you want to gather all your information to the end before you let your brain say, okay, I think it's this. I had a buddy of mine, he confused a Barolo from Piedmont to Italy, with a Pinot Noir. Now, aromas and flavors, they're similar, but a Barolo has way more tannin. That it'll take your upper lip and pull it up over your head. It'll make your teeth stick to your gums. Okay. But what he did is he jumped to the conclusion before he did all his analysis, because Pinot Noirs aren't that tannin. All right. But in a similar case with whiskeys, you want to gather all the data first. And you want to be able to discern the difference between a 40 and a 43 and a 40 and a 40 and a 46. The challenge is, and again, this is for comparisons, it's easier to tell the difference when you have the two whiskeys side by side. Because you go, wow, this one has more intensity, there's more mouthfeel, it has more weight, maybe even a little sweeter, more roundness. What gives you that? More ABV. And so, but if you're only picking that up because you're comparing it, that seems lighter, thinner, softer. And I don't know if you can hear, an airplane just flew overhead. Must be the Coast Guard. I live next to the ocean. See, but can you do that? Is your brain such that, and your palate such that you can detect that without comparing it to something else? Right? How tall is that? You ever see someone on stage or in a movie or on television, and they look like they're a normal height, but then they stand next to somebody who's 5'10", 6 foot, and you're like, oh, well, that guy's what? Tom Cruise, for example. Tom Cruise, when he's standing by himself, depending on the camera angle, seems like a normal height person. But you put him next to someone who's 5'10", 6 foot, and go, oh, wow, that dude's short, right? Of course, they have to film him from certain angles and record him certain ways and so forth, so they don't, show off how short he is. But if he's on stage or on film or on camera by himself and not stand next to something that's obviously taller, a person that's obviously taller, then he doesn't seem so short. It's the same thing with ABV. Sometimes it's a little easier to tell what is that. So what you can do if you have multiple whiskeys and you're smelling and tasting them all, decide at the end having smelled and tasted these, which ones are the higher ABV? This one seems the thinnest, the lightest, whatever else. Okay, that's the probably lowest ABV. Then it's probably in the 43. This one's the biggest, boldest, so forth. So you can kind of determine all of them at the end as what the ABV is on. And you're doing by comparison. Now, there are sort of somewhat general standard ABVs. 40 is a minimum, 43, 46, right? Those are probably three most common. Then in bourbon, 50, 100 proof is really, really, really common. But like this, the good old 54.2. The Coy Vreckens, 57.1. You get those little more odd, particularly if it's point something. Like if you're tasting this blind, are you going to get that it's 46.3? Probably not. But if you can get it at 46, get you close enough, and you understand what the range is. Hey, you doing, man? All right. Do not purchase any Scotch single malts unless 46 ABV or more. Got to disagree. You can buy one of them as you want, but I think there are some significant whiskeys you're going to miss out on, and you should try and have. Let's say Cragganmore, the Cragganmore 12 is worth buying. Lafroig, the Lafroig 10-year-old. The Lafroig 10-year-old here in the United States is 43. In the UK, it's 40. So, got to disagree with you on that one, but you buy and drink whatever the hell it is you want. Late to the party, EriK. Good evening. Trying the Tomatin 14-year-old port cask. I'm a big fan of Tomatin. The mouthfeel on them, I really like them. Would be game from head to head with a Glenmorangie Quinta Rubin. I just bought a new bottle of the Quinta Rubin. It's now a 14-year-old. I had the bottle when it was a 12-year-old. All right, next topic. All right, I've smelled these. I'm gonna do a little bit of a taste. I'm gonna start with the Stewdar. If you're joining in late, I have two Bunnahabhains 12 and the Stewdar, and I provided the notes earlier. There's about a $20 difference. Now, the Stewdar, if you've never had the 12-year-old, actually comes across, I would say, particularly for the price point, impressive. I think it's in the mid palate. How much flavor is coming across your palate from the start and the end of the finish? I think it's in the mid palate that it's not quite there. But in terms of intensity on those, I mean, there's the 12. I get like baklava. I get like barbecue. I get like almost like a molasses maple syrup kind of character. The Stewdar, I get that, but everything's volume-wise, intensity is turned down. It's mild. It's much more subtle. It's lighter, and in the mid palate, it doesn't have. And again, I have the 12. It doesn't have quite the delivery of the 12-year-old. I missed the old Pulteney 12. That was 43. All right, the next one. Next topic. Number 8. Age comparison. And I have the Ardbeg 5-year-old versus the Ardbeg 10-year-old. This is probably, I would say, ABV and age are two of the most important categories. I think cask comparison is a little more obvious, a little easier to tell. Not only in terms of aromas and flavors, but in terms of color. But age comparison, there are some older whiskeys that can come across younger, and there are some younger whiskeys that can fool you if they're done really, really well. The Ardbeg 5-year-old, it's bourbon cask and sherry cask, and after it has been aerated, after it's had some time open, it's much more impressive, and the youth notes, kind of a saccharine character. Some people say baby sick. I never had any kids, but I've been around kids who, they puke, whatever. I understand where the smell is, but I don't equate youth smell to baby sick. I to me, it come across more as baby vomit. Yeah, they were, getting a little bit of baby vomit. Uh, I get more, but and then some other qualities. Sometimes the fruit character of a younger whiskey can almost be like melon. A young Ardbeg will come across as melon versus once matured will get more into lemon and lime. The best way to this is not the best way to perceive that is to taste new make. Taste new make, taste new make, taste new make. Anytime you have the opportunity, you're visiting, particularly if you're visiting a distillery, is taste some new make and buy a bottle. If you can buy a bottle, buy a bottle, because that'll help set a baseline for age, right? No age, and so then from there, if it's the same distillery, 5-year-old, 10-year-old, and go up say the 19-year-old, like the Trayvon from Ardbeg, and you get the sense, the sensory experience of what maturation does to a whiskey. So highly, highly recommend getting new makes. Oh yes, thank you. I don't get baby sick notes. It sounds awful. Yeah, I've heard that descriptor before. Uh, and I've had friends with kids, and I'll hold them. And I had when I was in the Marine Corps, a buddy of mine, and I'd go over his house and play with the kids, stuff like that. And he ended up having like 4 or 5 kids. I would bring an extra shirt when I'd go visit because inevitably you hold the kid and the kid, bleh. You're supposed to put a towel over you or something. I would just bring an extra shirt because inevitably that kid's gonna throw up on. And what the throwing up is, it's baby food or mama's milk. Ugh. Anyway, yeah, yeah, that's pretty gross. All right, next one. Producer comparison. Producer comparison. This is probably one of the most classic producer comparison. The Ardbeg 10-year-old versus the Lefroy 10-year-old. They're next door neighbors, both heavily peated, both from the Kildalton region on the southern part of Islay. One is at 46% ABV. The other one's going to be at 40 or 43% alcohol by volume. The stills are different. They're both bourbon cask. But their stills are different, and Ardbeg has a distinctive sort of funny little rectifier on their still that gives them a unique character. But for me, I'm Ardbeg all the way on this one, but they both have like a lemon and lime character. The Lefroy is a little bit more ashy. The Lefroy is maybe a little bit more seaweed character. I get a little bit more mint on the finish from the Lefroy, particularly when they're new. The Lefroy requires more time to sort of open up. That being said, while I've tried them over and over again, and it's not like you just do a side-by-side comparison and then you're done. The bottles are open. Come back 6 months later, a year later, a year and a half later, whatever, and do it again. Because the two bottles, they might be opening up more, and of course your preferences change as well. So maybe 6 months, a year later, you go back and go, oh, you know what? This time around, I prefer this one. So it's not an absolute decision which one you prefer. And you may have, well, I like these characteristics about this whiskey, but I like these characteristics about this whiskey. In some ways, I like this one better for this reason. I like this one better for this reason. So it doesn't have to necessarily be an absolute, winner. I know people like competitions, like it's a boxing match, or in the case of tomorrow, we have the Super Bowl, 2 football teams going head to head. There's nothing to be absolute. It's just like some characteristics I like better about this one, and some I like about this one. Some people might prefer the peat character of Lefroy over Ardbeg. Some people might like the fruit character and the mouth feel. I like there's a sort of a muddy, earthy character to Ardbeg. So it doesn't have to be an absolute, one's a winner and one's a loser. And your mind may change when you come back to it later. All right, next one. Vintage comparison. This is probably another one of the most. I think I maybe even already mentioned this. Oh, this is not age comparison, but vintage comparison. So, an example. Here's a Ardbeg from 2024, and here's an Ardbeg from the 1990s. This is difficult to do unless you've been into whiskey for a long time, or you're going to shell off the bucks to buy older bottles, maybe an auction or something like that. This can be a little more challenging to do because the bottles are hard to come by. This is also a thing I wish, hindsight's 2020. So my Ardbeg, I'm on my sixth bottle, 10. The Ugadol, which is sitting down on the floor because it's an empty bottle. I think that's my second or third. I wish I had saved a bottle so that as I would go by, as I go bottle to bottle, I could go back and do comparison with previous bottles. Take another sip. Of the Studar. On its own, if you're not putting up against anything, not putting up against its bigger brother, which is just kind of smack it around, it's a really nice whiskey. One of the things, if you save a little bit of, if you have a bottle, you're going to replace it. Like you just finished, like Ardbeg 10 or Lafroig 10 or Bourbon 12 or whatever, and you save some, you can become nostalgic, I think, about a bottle. And earlier in your whiskey journey, you may have been more impressed with that bottle that you had this 5 years old and man, you just blew you away. And you can sort of become overly romantic about it. Your estimation of it is really overrated. Maybe you overrated that whiskey. And coming back to it, you might go, you know what? It's still good, but it's not as great as I thought it was. Personal example. My entry to Scotch whiskey, single malt, was the Macallan 12-year-old. You may have heard the story before. I was studying for the the WSET diploma. Unit was on spirits. I had no interest in whiskey. Bought a bunch of minis rather than buying full bottles because we were going to have essay questions and blind tasting. And you didn't have to, do ABV. And I just had to recognize, okay, this is a rum. This is, this is Scotch, this is bourbon, this is whatever else, number. So I bought a bunch of these minis. And when I had the Macallan 12-year-old, it blew me away. So I did a video of it, of my impression of it, and I scored it real high. I give it a ridiculous 95 points. Jeremy over at Sipper Social Club still teases me about this. Well, why is that? Well, because I was going from wine, which typical wine is 13.5 to 14.5 ABV. Yeah, some big Zinfandels can be 15% or whatever. And some, lighter wines like Rieslings or whatever can be under 13.5, but 13.5 to 14.5, a general category. When you go from 14.5 to 40, that's a huge jump. And distillation intensifies flavors. So obviously going from a wine to a whiskey, it's like, holy cow, this is really intense. Even if it's only 40 or 43% alcohol, wow, this is it'll seem like hot. It'll see all this characteristics. Now, eventually, we get around to, hey, Dustin, how you doing, man? Old box Macallan 12 versus black box. Gonna put my money on the old maroon box. Right. So Dustin's a man who drinks older whiskeys and has a memory of older whiskeys. And I say, don't listen to Dustin because he only drinks the good shit. What does he know? He only drinks the good stuff. So, but people have been doing whiskeys for a long time, and I see this in comments. Oh, Ugadol these days. Oh, it's not as good as it was 15 years ago or 10 years ago. Oh, it used to be so much. Oh, da 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 da. They say that. They could be right, but I have to say, you have an old bottle, like Dustin might have. Do you have an old bottle from 10, 15, whatever years ago? No. So what are you basing your comparison on? Your memory? I got news for you, man. I got news for you, man. Your memory is flawed. Your memory is flawed. And it's good to revisit bottles to refresh your memory because you can also become overly nostalgic, particularly if it's real early in your whiskey journey, because your perceptions change. Hopefully, they improve and so forth. You can find those old boxes here and there. Anyway, you can get old prices sometimes, and now I'm seeing them at a premium. Yeah, absolutely. So if you say, "Oh, whatever the whiskey, it was better back then," you may be right, or it could be your memory's flawed. Your memory's flawed. I've had it with. I'm gonna taste some of the 12-year-old. You ever thought of a song or a band? Maybe you listened to them back in high school, but you haven't listened to them in 20, 30 years. In my case, 40 years ago. Wow. Graduate high school 40 years ago. Wow. Yeah, 1984. 1984. I graduated high school, man. I'm getting old, man. 100% flawed at best. Yep. 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 Absolutely. So every once in a while, there'll be some song. I'll get nostalgic about some song I hear on the radio, some band. And it's a song I haven't listened to in a long time. Oh man, remember that song? Remember da-da-da-da. Oh, the final countdown. Da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da. It's the final countdown. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Okay. And man, that was such a great song. And then you listen to it. You haven't heard it in decades. And you're like, whoa, they way overdid the keyboards on that one. Yeah. Yeah, hair metal. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, hair metal. They way overdid the keyboards. They way overdid the keyboards on that one. But that was what was going on there. Our synthesizers. Everybody was synthesizing the hell out of everything. It was overdone. It's still a cool song. Getting weird noises from my refrigerator. It's still a cool song, but man, they just overdid the synthesizers. But there is a guy on YouTube I've seen. He takes a song. He's a really good metal guitarist, and he overlays his guitars over the song, and it's great. I actually like his version with his guitars fed in over. Anyway, so your perception of whiskey, if you have older bottles, to do comparison between the two. Have they really gotten better, or is it just your memory has gotten worse? Production comparison. This is number 7. Number 5, production comparison. Now, there's a gazillion different production variables that you could do. I just put in here double distilled versus triple distilled. But we could do a lot of edits from these same 2 bottles, difference because production covers everything from the barley strain to whether using their own malting floors to whether it's peated or not, to how many distillations, Springbank being 2.5, how the size, shape of the distills, are they doing worm tub, are they doing shell and tube condensers, and on and on and on. But you can, if you get to understand what double distillation does versus what triple distillation does, you can focus your brain to focus on the distinctive characteristics that double versus triple distillation does. Now, these are similar in lightness. Glenmorangie having those giraffe tall stills and Auchentoshan being triple distilled makes this one a little bit more significant because, take this off, with a real tall still, you have more rectification. So the spirit is trying to, yeah, it's a pot still. So you have heating coils or direct fire heating it, and it has to climb and climb and climb. Imagine this is really tall, climb and climb, to the top. And if it's really, really tall, it's going to keep, you're going to get more rectification, and it's going to keep falling down, keep falling down, keep falling down. And so only that which is really light is going to carry over and go into the condenser and then go on to the spirit still. Well, there's some similarities, I think, in terms of on the palate, a real tall still that can have with triple distillation. If you think about it, if you think about the production, so you could do two different types of comparison with those two bottles. You could do double distillation versus triple distillation, and maybe even bring in a third double distilled that's not from such a huge still, maybe even Macallan, which is a short squat still, and do those comparison. And so this is challenging because I'm just going to take a run around. There are 100 different things that contribute to the profile of whiskey. Everything is something as subtle and maybe even debatable as a water to the barley strain, to whether it's barley comes from the East Coast versus West Coast, local barley, say from Islay, versus floor malting versus a louder mash tun versus a rake and plow mash tun, and on and on and on. All the way up to, of course, the biggest contributors is going to be the casks, 70%, give or take. But those other little things also make little tweaks to the profile of the whiskey, and it takes practice and concentration. You can't be getting hammered while doing this, because you're just screwing up your brain and your palate if you're getting hammered, because you have to maintain focus and your wits about you in order to be making these distinctions and in the profile comparisons. Studar and 12-year-old. So I can say this for this. You can also, in your brain, decide what it is you're focusing on. And this, again, is a discipline. So imagine this. You're listening to a band. It's one of my favorite bands, Rush. You can listen to the song. Throughout the song, I am choosing to focus on the drums, Neil Peart. And it's not that you don't hear the bass. It's not that you don't hear the guitar, or Geddy Lee would play keyboards, whatever. Not that you don't hear that. It's just that it's not your primary focus. I'm focusing on the drums. And maybe even take a band that the drums aren't such an obvious major player in it. It's more just in the background. But you can still mentally focus on the drums. If you watch a movie, if a movie is really, 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 really good, I will watch that movie multiple times. I have watched The Matrix, the first Matrix film, at least 10 times. At least 10 times. I saw it 6 times. No, more than that. I probably watched it 20 times. I watched it 6 times in the theater. I probably watched it on video another 10, 15, 20 times. I don't know. The first time I watch a movie, I'm just trying to get the big overall picture. I'll watch it again to get the plot, character development. I'll watch it another time to look for the intro. Usually there's a 3-part act to it. What is the climax of it? What is the denouement? What's the intro? But you can listen. I'm just going to pay attention to the camera angles. And what is the director doing? I'm going to pay attention to the editing cuts. How are they doing the angle cuts? I'm going to pay attention to the music. There are some songs like the Star Wars prequels, and everybody complains about the Star Wars prequels, but which one is it? The first one? Yeah, the first Star Wars prequel. The music is awesome, and of course, what's his name? The Sith Lord. What's his name? Darth Sid. No, man, I forget his name. Darth Schmuckatelli. What the hell his name is? Put it in the comment section. Not Jar Jar Binks. What the hell is his name? Darth. I don't know. Anyway, but there's the lightsaber scene, and there's the combat. Okay, that's great. The music behind that scene is amazing. Amazing. Darth Maul, yes. Thank you very much. Darth Maul. Sorry, it's been a while. Yes, Darth Maul. The music is awesome. I mean, it's just fantastic, fantastic music, and that's what really makes the scene in the fighting scene. So is the music. Okay, in the same way that you can choose, in the same way that you can choose to focus on a singular component of a movie or a song or a band, you can choose mentally to focus. I'm just going to focus on the ABV. I'm just going to focus on the casks. I'm just going to focus on the mouthfeel. I'm just going to focus on the subtle notes. Is this a direct fire still? Does this have a direct fire still? What contributes to that? And this little characteristic I'm picking up, is that worm tub or is that direct fire? This little interesting note, or is that from the cask? And the challenge is, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Oops, sorry, I meant to hit wrong one. Yeah, he's no longer with us, unfortunately. The challenge is you have to learn the cause and effects. If you do this, it causes this. 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 And be able to calibrate and learn in your head and catalog that in your head, the cause and effects between what you're doing in production or climate, a dunnage versus racked warehouse makes a difference. And you have to sort of catalog that in your brain and then remember it when you're tasting. Again, we're talking about beyond mere just kicking back and enjoying it. We're talking about sensory analysis of whiskeys. And so, say in wine, the soils are more relevant. Climate, maybe, difference between Burgundy and California Pinot Noir, difference between Oregon and Burgundy Pinot Noir, difference between Oregon and California Pinot Noir, or New Zealand. New Zealand and California Pinots are much more alike. But you have to figure, okay, these traits cause these these production or climate or cask or warehouse or whatever results in this. And it takes a great deal of concentration, pay attention to taking notes. But it also takes going back over and over and over. Now, I've heard people say, oh, you go to Scotch distillery, there's whiskey distilleries, and it's all sort of the same thing. Yeah, there's a lot of repetition, particularly the person who's doing the tour, they're 19 years old because, that's the legal drink age in Scotland, and they're given a script, yada, yada. Unfortunately, you get some of that. But if you read books and you do your own studying and reading before you go and visit the distillery, then you can sort of make observations. You don't have to ask any questions. You just make your own observations and things you saw, and you see something, go, wait a minute, they have one of those in this distillery. I'm going to ask about that. And even if that person can't ask, they can usually go get you the answer. All right. Next. All right. This next one is going to be the one that most people are interested in. Quality price ratio comparison. Because most people who are watching, they're not studying for exams, they're not doing whiskey tuber videos. They are most concerned, hey, what am I going to buy? They're looking for purchasing advice. And what are they going to buy? And so here's two, obviously, huge difference. But both you have a Loch Lomond 18-year-old and a Macallan 18-year-old. Now there's a gazillion other differences between these two producers, other than just at the price. But look, one's $90, and the other one, at least in my neighborhood, is over $400. That's nuts. All right. I've never had the Loch Lomond 18-year-old. They're not part of the one of 24 producers on the Master of Scotch exam. But after I finish the exam, I want to continue studying distilleries. Loch Lomond's on my list. That's a distillery I need to study or want to study to further my studies. But look at the price. an 18-year-old for 90 bucks, and it's available where I'm at. I should probably go buy a bottle before they disappear. But that's amazing. Now, obviously, this is an extreme. That's an extreme comparison between in prices. But, and again, a lot of people, Macallan, oh, they're overpriced. Oh, it's a luxury brand. Oh, they're going to a particular market, yada, yada, yada. We all know the spiel. We're going to the spiel. Mm. Mm, 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 mm. Cruise ship leader for 110 bucks. Yeah. Again, for the purpose of this picture, I was pulling extremes. All right, extreme differences, like 48 versus a cask strength. 43% versus cask strength. That's extreme differences in ABV comparison. For training your brain, it's better to have something that's really, really close. But nevertheless, if you tried to lock alone an 18-year-old and you're really, really impressed with it, you're like, hell no, I'm not spending 400 bucks for a Macallan. And Loch Lomond doesn't get a lot of love. They don't get a notoriety. They don't get a lot of publicity, at least not outside of whiskey tuber circles. All right. Post Ardbeg 19 and Springbank 18 these days with their prices. Yeah, the Trayvon, yeah, it's pricey. All right. Next one. And that's probably this topic people are most interested in. The challenge of the whiskey from a whiskey tuber, when you talk about prices, and it doesn't cost that much, or I pay more here. Da, 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 da. Prices vary across the country and from in Canada versus US. Da, 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 da. A lot of times I can get things cheaper here in California. A lot of times other places that have fixed pricing they get cheaper. So that's why I try to say it costs this much in my neighborhood. That means the local stores here and so forth. Obviously, other places you can get a different price. Here's an interesting one. Region comparison. An Irish single malt that's peated versus a Scotch single malt peated. Now, the Connemara is at 40 ABV. The Ardbeg 10 is at 46 ABV. So there's a difference there. And supposedly Connemara is getting their peat from Islay. I'm not a big fan of the Connemara, just saying. But you can imagine doing other types of comparisons between regions. Not only difference between, say, Ireland and Scotland, and maybe there are, better comparisons between Irish and Scottish, right? I just picked two. Whoa. Was not a fan of Bunnahabhain 18, 140 bucks. Red Spot 325 in Kentucky, one time 25. Yeah. Yeah. And then prices change. Once the hype gets out, the prices suddenly change. We all know about that. But still, if you can get into ballpark figures to how much you're paying for these whiskeys, you can kind of, so much. Usually not as extreme, but it's worth challenging. So if you're looking to look, I want 5 whiskeys. You're not going to do this kind of nuts with all these bottles. Look, I just want 5 or 6 whiskeys that are my go-tos, and I don't want to piss off my wife or my husband or my boyfriend or girlfriend, my dog or anybody else on how much money I'm spending on whiskeys. My grandmother, my mother, my lawyer, and how much money I'm spending on whiskeys. I just want 5 or 6, and I want to budget-wise, because I got to put diapers on the kids. I got to put a roof on my house. I got to pay off my student loans, whatever else you're doing. So I need to budget whiskey. So what's the best quality price ratio I can get for my buck? And so that's where these factors tend to come into play. So, and so what can I best get for 50 bucks? And a lot of whiskey tours will do videos, the top 5 best bourbons for under 50 bucks. 5 Scotch whiskeys or single malts. You don't have to go Scotch for under 50 bucks. If I would just go single malts, regardless of region, best single malts for under 50 bucks I would give you a top 5, there might be 1 Scotch under that. The rest are going to be probably Irish and American for under $50. Because Scotch is so dang expensive. All right. Mouthfeel, basically the same. In terms of the roundness, the weight on the palate, and sweetness from the alcohol. In terms of the basic notes, if I just describe them, are going to be similar. The difference is the 12-year-old has much more extraction, so much more intensity of flavor, and also a better mid palate. The Studar comes across, it doesn't, the 12-year-old goes, bam, bam, bam. You know what I mean? The Studar goes, bam, there's an intensity of flavor. You know what I mean? That's when we're, that's the difference between the two, really. You can't put that in right if you're doing if you're doing a blog versus a video. They can't really describe that, but that's kind of the way it goes, you know. Well, this blend of 16-year-old Kilkerran and 50-year-old Hazelburn I just got today for 99 is the best. Whoa! Where in the hell did you get it for that? Of course, Dustin's just here to piss you guys off. In case you don't know. That's why Dustin joins. He's just here to piss everybody off about what he's drinking and how much he pays for it. Anyway, alrighty. He's here to piss. He's here to piss the poor people off, the people who can't drink the good stuff. All right. All right. So I got 2 left. The region comparison. Okay. All of this basically comes down to calibrate your brain. Put this, catalog this in your brain, or calibrate this in your brain, so that just like you have a Geiger counter to measure radiation, you have what's it called for measuring bricks, the sugar level in liquids, the spectrometer for, you take grapes, you squeeze it on, and you look to it, and it tells you what the bricks are at, so the sugar levels of the grapes, or Richtometer for earthquakes. Anyway, so you want to turn your brain into a whiskey meter. You want to calibrate your brain and turn it into a whiskey meter. So that in your brain, again, we talk about nose and palate, but those are just the receivers of the information. It's your brain. Really, you're tasting with your brain. And your nose and your palate are just receiving the information into your brain and into your heart, your belly. Get in my belly. Okay. So is to calibrate your brain and develop a good memory of all these things, so that, because sometimes I can actually think about whiskeys that even if I don't have them in front of me, if someone asks me a question, I can conjure up from memory those whiskeys and go, well, this has this has this, and in a sense, taste and compare these whiskeys in my brain, even if I don't have them in front of me. And as I talk about the whiskeys, I'm bringing back the memories of these whiskeys. Now, of course, as we mentioned earlier, your memories can fade and it may not be as accurate. So every once in a while, you got to kind of go back and make sure your memory is up to date and on target for what you're actually tasting. Now, this brings us to the number one reason for doing comparative tasting. What is the number one reason for doing comparative tasting? If you're watching this on the replay, put in the comment. If you're watching in the live stream, put in the comment. What do you think is the number one reason? Yes. Wow, Dustin. Yes. Although you're very close, as close as you probably going to get. The number one reason is fun with your friends. Fun with your friends. All right, I got to. Oops. Yep. Fun with your friends. fun with your friends. Yes, have fun, but have fun with your friends. In fact, you there could be a very much a um, for the money, for the money. There you go. Yeah, for the money. Yeah, if I'm charging people, this is true, Dustin. This implies we have a life, but you know, one of the I'm going to say I'm going to talk a little bit about the uh, Wizard Academy, the whiskey marketing school classes for a second here. There's different types of whiskey education: formal education, informal education, home education, self-education. Well, there's the Scotch Whisky Association, there's Moonshine University, and so on and so forth. And there's whiskey tubers. Probably the greatest advantage, in my personal opinion, of the whiskey marketing school down there in Austin, Texas, at the Wizard Academy, is it has a heavy, at least the first two levels, it has a heavy emphasis on comparative tasting. And I don't know how busy Daniel is. I know he's been having other people do. I've taught classes there. He's gonna have other people doing classes there, but this is, I would say, Daniel's strength. I mean, there's a lot. I love what he's doing with the channel, the storytelling. I love all that. He's great. He's a great communicator. But I think his strength in the class is that in doing the class, it's the comparison. What they do is they have like these wood, like little wood pallets, whatever disc, and then they have little cups on, and then they put three glasses, and it could be Irish single malt versus Scotch single malt. It could be bourbon versus Scotch. It could be age differences. It could be cask differences. Whatever else. There's a number of different differences they do throughout the class. I don't remember how many tastings we do in a class. I would guess 10, 15. There's got to be more than that. Of course, you're not getting hammered along the way. You need to have a break, and you have lunch, and all kind of stuff. And it's a great environment, and it's good to be hanging out with people. It's a lot of fun. There's all that, and you get this ridiculous thing to hang around your neck that I never wear. It's in a box on my shelf. But the best thing out of all that, and I would like to do it again actually, is the comparative tasting. And I think that's the strength. One of the if not the, in my personal opinion, major strength of that school is the comparative tasting guided by Daniel. Period. That's it. It has an emphasis on communication, on delivery, and because it's marketing school, obviously that has to play in there. But from my personal experience, I think it is the head-to-head comparison between the whiskeys. If I was to run that portion, I would add more things to it. Maybe handouts. Hey, in the first lineup we did this. In the second lineup we did this. In the third lineup we did this. You should be taking your own notes, but I would make those available rather than just talk about it. Because at the end, what they do is you go through all the classroom is shaped like this. It kind of goes up a little bit like this, and you have the rows of chairs. The person who's doing the pouring, usually a graduate, they're sitting in the back, and they got the balls in the back, and then say, Daniel, so here's a stage down here. So like the stage is down here, the chairs go up like this, and the guy person in the back here, and doing tasting. And it's at the end, Daniel, and he nails them. He can identify the bottles just from the blind tasting as to what's what. I would hand out additional notes as to what you have, and maybe even a pre-prepared little hand notebook where you could write your notes about it. And anyway, I just a little bit more information, kind of like the way I do in my videos. But that's what I'm saying. Other than that, I would say it's probably the best part of the whole training there. And if you ever go down there and take a class, and I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. So he hasn't totally asked me to say this. It's not a paid advertisement or anything like that. I know some people watching this on live on the replay will give me a thumbs down and whatever. I don't give a rat's ass. I don't care. Everybody and everything has its pros and cons. I think they have some definite strengths in their teaching there that nobody else is, that you're not going to get anywhere else. And I think they're doing a really great job of it. And it's very friendly and to new people. Alrighty. So obviously the Bunnahabhain 12 is better than the Stewart R. The takeaways for me on this is I wish we knew what the age was of the Stewardar, but we don't. But we do know the history as to why they introduced it. And I said before, they introduced this because they had a shortage of the 12, so they brought in something younger and called it something different. So in order to fill the spot in the market until they brought the 12 back and they had enough stock on hand. That's why it's younger, because it was released originally as younger. So even though I can't tell the age on it, I definitely tell it's younger, but it doesn't have the new makey characteristics, which I like, but doesn't have the sense of the extraction on the cask. It doesn't have the same intensity of flavor on the mid palate, but it does have the feel of the 12-year-old on the palate. $20, give or take. $20 difference between the Stewardar and the 12-year-old. Would I spend the extra $20 to get the 12-year-old right on the Stewardar? If you can't afford the 12-year-old, you can afford it, buy the Stewardar. But if you can afford it, yes, I would pay the extra $20 and get the 12-year-old. I would be the 20-year-old. Yeah, that's one of my rants. I would, because it's that 12 is obviously is the minimum. Is the minimum. All right. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you watch us on the replay, if you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. Give this video a thumbs up. If you are watching the Super Bowl tomorrow, I hope whatever team you are rooting for wins or whatever. Personally, I won't be watching the Super Bowl because I don't give a rat's ass about Super Bowl. All right. Until next time. So long, Joe.